I'm Ken Wiele. I'm the director of bands at Indian Trail High School, and I'm going to tell you about this wonderful person who I was lucky enough to come under the guidance of. His name was Fred Sturm. He's the director of jazz studies at Lawrence University, and it was my senior year in high school. I traveled to Green Bay, Wisconsin with my jazz ensemble, and my dad was directing the high school jazz band at the time, and I performed for a team of clinicians, and we played some really cool jazz music, and I was lucky enough to have a solo on one of the numbers. Little did I know that the guy who was listening to me that day would become such a huge influence on my life. Fred Sturm was one of the judges, and as I performed, I noticed he was at the table listening, and it had a really big smile on his face. And after the festival was over, I got this letter. Now, in those days, there was no email. There wasn't anything about electronic communication. He sent me a letter, snail mail style, and it was this beautiful letter written encouraging me to consider applying at Lawrence University. And at Lawrence University, Fred wrote in the letter, there was a wonderful jazz program, and he'd love to have me be a part of it. I was accepted at Northwestern and Lawrence University both, and I knew that Lawrence was the place to be. After meeting Fred and talking with Fred, he felt a lot like a big brother. Little did I know what an influence he would have on me as the years went on. So I took lessons from Fred for 4 years. And I remember walking up the steps to his studio and hearing him play with this beautiful, marvelous, gorgeous trombone sound. So Fred was this giant of a man, and when he played, he had a giant sound. And I remember going up the steps and just thinking, my gosh, how am I ever going to sound like this? And when I took my trombone out, it just seems to pale in comparison to the way he sounded. But he was very patient. And there are many lessons when we did a lot more talking than playing. And he would help me kind of adjust to the changes that I was going through in terms of, adjusting from high school to college. But not only that, the changes from going from a small, really small, tiny little town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to what at that time seemed like a bustling metropolis, Appleton, Wisconsin. So he helped me, kind of negotiate my way through all the things that at the time seemed like really huge deals to me as I learned how to be a college student. But I learned early on that Fred was much more than just a great teacher. He was a mentor and somebody who believed in me a lot of times more than I even believed in myself. And when I graduated from college and got my degree in music ed, he wrote me a letter. And I still have the letter. It was typed out with a typewriter, and he was at the Eastman School of Music at the time, and he was just touching base with me and following up, and he said, I really want you to know I'm excited about you getting your next gig as a teacher. If there's anything I can do, let me know. I'll make a phone call. I'll do everything I can to help you get that first job. And I was able to line up 2 or 3 interviews in that summer after I graduated from college. And the first interview I had was in a place called Kenosha. And I distinctly remember walking in the door to that interview and looking at the guy across the table who was interviewing me. And I got this wonderfully positive vibe immediately without even having any words exchanged between the two of us. And I thought it was remarkable that the interview went so well. This guy, when he asked me questions and I answered his questions, seemed like I hit a home run with every answer. And on my way out of the interview, the coordinator of fine arts, the guy who was running the interview, said to me, thanks so much for stopping in, and by the way, Fred Sturm speaks very highly of you. And at that moment I realized that before I had even gotten in the door, Fred had called this guy and laid the table, set the table for me, schmoozed his way, and must have made up a whole lot of good things about me, because the guy treated me like I walked on water. And So that was another classic case of Fred believing in me, and then I couldn't help it. I had to, because he had that belief, I just never wanted to disappoint him. I always wanted to rise up to that level that he thought I could reach. So long story short, I got offered the job, and in most part it was due to Fred and his taking the time in the middle of his graduate studies to call and plead my case and advocate for me, and I'll never forget it. And then as the course of my career went on, every time I had a certain situation where I had a career choice to make, where I needed to maybe make a job change or whatever, I always called Fred and asked Fred, hey, Fred, can you give me some advice? And he was always there for me, always giving me really, really good advice about the next step in my career. And I was offered the coordinator of fine arts position at one point, and I called Fred up and I said, man, this is a really good paying job. I mean, I'm going to be making, maybe $30,000 to $40,000 more. Should I take it? I've got a young family. And his advice was, stay away. The best thing about your job is kids and music. And it sounds to me like that job that you're talking about has neither. So I took his advice, and I've never regretted it for a moment. And then the remarkable thing was, as my sons got older and they started looking at college, Fred was still at Lawrence and teaching there. And my sons ended up both attending Lawrence and having a chance to work with him as well. And it was always fun to get the emails from Fred, and he would give me the updates. And he would always, be extremely happy to, help me with anything I needed with the boys. But he'd also pull my leg like crazy. You remember him sent me an email. He'd say, "Oh, I had to bail Ken out of jail again last night. Jake was at the strip club the other day," and he'd always come up with these crazy stories. So the last year that Jake was there, Fred came down with cancer and began a struggle of about 10 years, it was about 10 years, where he fought in the most courageous way I could ever imagine. And every time I called him to offer him support, it was always the other way around. The conversation always twisted, and he was giving me the support, and he was giving me the kudos and encouragements. And I'd get off the phone and I'd think, hey, wait a minute, I called him. Here's this guy. He's fighting for his life, and he's trying to help me feel better. But that was the way Fred was. He'd always do remarkable things with people, and he's the most influential man besides my dad that I've ever had in my life. And when he passed away a year and a half ago, it was really, really rough. So when we gave our concert, I kind of shared with my band kids a story about what an influence Fred was on my life, and they connected with a piece that we decided we wanted to dedicate that performance to him. So we performed the piece, and it was all I could do to get through it, because it was such a heart-wrenching thing, thinking about him and all the things that he'd done for me. And the kids had got a little poster and put together all their signatures on it and gave it to me as we were about to start the concert. So it's really a pretty special thing. And to this day, when I'm teaching in class and I'm looking around and working with the kids, I always teach as if he's still in the room.